Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments onto most of the platforms you might be watching it on, and they will show up here in my chat room. The chat room is on the screen today since I don't have a guest, and we can all share it. I am once again looking at which of the different platforms I use reaches the most people, with the intention of focusing on trying to gather the audience a little bit more in one place. So, in the next few days, there may be announcements of which platforms I will definitely continue with. Certainly, the YouTube channel will always be continued with. Some of the Facebook pages may come or go as they've already done. And we'll see what works best. Um, so on some of the Facebook pages, I get only a couple of views. On others, that there are many views. So I want to focus the broadcast a little bit more in that sense. If there's a page that you particularly enjoy watching it on, let me know, and I'll bear that in mind. And hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee. Um, Yesterday was our local Imbolc celebration. This weekend was the Sabbat of Imbolc on Saturday. Um, we celebrated on Sunday because that's the day that we actually get together here in Danville. And also we had our online ritual last night, and they were both quite lovely, and I enjoyed them both very much. We had a good number of people come out for the for the Imbolc celebration. Hello to an invisible friend who says "Saluto mia amico." I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. But welcome, invisible friend, and saluton to you. Um, and yeah, we had a lovely time. We made Bridget's crosses. We had the ceremony itself, and lots of social time, which is always good. We also did a healing circle for one of the members. But the other thing that was very much on my mind this weekend is that Lady Bitterwind, my altar sister, the long-serving first elder of the Corellian tradition, would have had her 80th birthday yesterday. And an invisible friend says that was Esperanto. Very cool. Um, and every time at this year, or every year at this time, I should say, I think of Lady Bitterwind. And I want to talk about her a little bit today and her legacy. And her legacy is in some places very explicit, in others very discreet, but it's in a lot of places. Um, as I say, she served as first elder of the Corellian tradition um, for a very long time. And Lady Bitterwind, well, she was an Aquarius, obviously, and she took the name Bitterwind because of the day on which she was born. And Candlemas in the Midwest tends to be a day of rather bitter winds. It was really interesting that she chose that name because it did not, for the most part, describe her at all. She was anything but a bitter wind. She was a charming and delightful person, very friendly, very positive. Um, I suppose she might have felt that some of her philosophical points of view might come under the term Bitterwind. Arguably, they do, depending on your own point of view. Lady Bitterwind saw things very differently from other people. That's also going to be a subject I want to talk about today. She was one of those people, and they're often Aquariuses, who will see things other people miss. Um, she will comment on ideas that other people either ignore or never noticed. And this was very important to me growing up because it really influenced my point of view. It strongly influenced many Corellian points of view that you find throughout our writings and lessons. And Lady Bitterwind was a great believer in the idea that the physical world is ultimately the perfect expression of deity. If you want to understand deity, you have to look at that physical world. And it's not all sunshine and rainbows. She was very big on coming back to that issue of predator and prey, which runs throughout nature. That conflict is part of life, and we cannot simply deny it because it's not always pleasant. And I've always felt this is a very insightful point of view. Um, it's like the concept of death. We cannot simply deny death because um, it can be unpleasant for people to experience or witness or live through. We must be mindful of it because it's an important part of the life. And even as people who believe in the immortality of the soul, when it comes to physical life, death is a very big part of it. And we need to be mindful of that. A lot of people who have what I would call a more Disneyfied view of the universe tend to ignore this sort of thing um, because they don't want to think about things that perhaps are not pleasant. But those things are very important to our understanding of life also. And it must be part of our philosophy. It must be part of our understanding. Lady Bitterwind felt that the world we live in is the ultimate example of recycling or upcycling, if you prefer. Because if you look at it, everything new is built from everything old. And in fact, in our online ritual last night, that's one of the things we talked about, how life is built on death, how the new plants grow up in the soil that is built on the bodies of the things that came before. Um, but this is true. And you cannot, well, you can look at just one half of that cycle, but it will have a very unbalanced view. You have to realize it's a cycle of life and death. And it is, in fact, a cycle. And everything that we teach, the things that we believe, tell us that this is a cycle, that we live, we die, we live again, we die again. We keep going, that it's an eternal spiral that we are in. And ideally, we get better with each time. Occasionally, we fall back a little bit. But this is something that I think a lot of people try to ignore. The cycle of predator and prey. A lot of people, I think, try to ignore this. They want to have an idea of nature as being full of friendly animals who all love each other and would never harm one another. Lady Bitterwind would have had a good laugh at that subject. And hello to Smack Fan in the chat room, because she was very much aware. Well, to quote the Addams family, that what's normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. But both of these things exist. And, I knew a man once, and he was a mentally challenged man. But he was a great fan of nature. He loved nature. He loved watching um, nature programs on TV, which was still a thing then. But one day, he saw a nature program where a baby lion was stomped to death by, I think it was a wildebeest. And this was so shocking to him, such a surprise to him, that he was suicidal over it. But in nature, these things happen. The wildebeest understood perfectly well, this is a lion who, when it grows up, will eat him. And so the wildebeest got rid of the lion. In actual nature, many of those animals eat one another. It's what they do. It's how they're designed. And hello to Nikki Dodd in the chat room. It's good to see you. And this is not the most cuddly, friendly aspect of nature, but if we claim that we revere nature, then we must pay attention to this and notice this, try to understand this and honor this, because it is absolutely part of it. Conflict. We cannot look at nature without seeing frequent conflict. I've been told the longest war ever fought on planet Earth did not involve humans, but was the long, drawn-out conflict between those who um, are life forms based on the consumption of oxygen and those who were more about the producing of the oxygen until finally a symbiotic relationship was established. Um, these are things for us to bear in mind because they tell us the nature of our universe. Um, Certain other religions, in fact, many other religions say, oh, nature is broken, because it doesn't reflect that Disneyfied attitude toward life. But the truth of the matter is that Disney is wonderful for fantasy movies, but it is not how life actually is. Now, this does not mean we don't want to build better lives, better societies, more just opportunities for everyone. Of course we do. But we also need to bear in mind that those challenges are there for a reason. This is how we grow. We will never have better societies if we're not challenged along the way, because we'll never address the inequities if they're not a problem. For that matter, if they weren't a problem, we wouldn't need to address them. But I look at things happening in the world today in Project 2025, which I've spoken about at great length, and in my mind, the best thing that can happen here is that this brings forward all of the evils of our community, all of the evils of our society, and allows us to change them. Whether we'll rise to the point of changing them, I don't know. But I'm hoping that we will, and I believe that's part of the reason that we're here. This is the challenge from deity to us to actually build that better world by reminding us very strongly of what we have not already fixed. And if you had asked me 20 years ago, if you had asked me 20 years ago, I would have said we were well on our way to fixing things that I now see are not even remotely fixed. And there's a certain level where I think this kind of had to happen for us to see how much that poison was still in our social bloodstream. And I can only say that I hope that we heal it and move on from it. And getting back to Lady Bitterwind, this would be the kind of point of view she would have had. Now, Lady Bitterwind was a Corellian archpriestess. She was the first elder of the tradition through most of my life. Um, she did eventually retire from that office 20 odd years ago, but she fulfilled it for a long time. But she was first and foremost actually a Discordian. And the Corellian tradition has a lot of Discordianism running through it just under the surface. We've had many prominent members who either were Discordian or could just as well have been Discordian. And that's actually been very important in my point of view toward building the strengths that we have had. Lady Bitterwind is an example of that. Ed the Pagan is an example of that. And what this did for us is it gave us a different point of view at the very center of the administrations that were running the tradition. And why do you need a different point of view? And, when we talk about leadership, when we talk about politics, this is, in my opinion, a very important point. You must have different points of view around you in order to have anything resembling a realistic point of view of what you're dealing with. Because if you're only surrounded with people who think exactly like you think, and who are going to say exactly what you would say, then anything you would miss, everyone is going to miss. Being in an echo chamber that way is never good. And it's kind of like inbreeding. When you have too much inbreeding, the traits in the family that are harmful become magnified. This isn't an immediate thing that happens, but it happens if you continue doing it. And you see it in families such as the Habsburgs or various ancient Egyptian dynasties and various other places historically. They end up with various birth defects, which they never needed to have had they only not inbred so heavily. This is what happens also when you put yourself in an echo chamber. You end up thinking that you already know everything, that nothing needs a second look, that you don't need any new policies, when in fact you often do. Part of running any organization or any event is being open to the different things you don't initially see, being open to the challenges you might not realize are there. And it's very important to have people around you who can see what you yourself might miss. And when you have a variety of different points of view around you, this is far more possible. And if you think, oh, I would never miss anything, you're lying to yourself. It's very easy to miss something that comes from a point of view different from your own. Um, if you find yourself, for example, well, let's use one of our favorite subjects. If you find yourself in a witch war, and the people on the other side think very differently from yourself, you're going to be having a bit of a problem for how to respond because you won't be able to understand where they're coming from. But if you have someone around you who can see where they're coming from, it will be helpful. And um, this is true in dealing with almost any situation that might involve unexpected things, and almost every situation could. So I strongly advise that if you are in a position of leadership, whether a leadership position in a multinational organization, or just your local coven, or even just in your personal life, surround yourself with people with different points of view, not only people who agree with yourself, um, because you'll be able to see things through their eyes that you might not have caught. And I think this is one of the great deficits in the pagan community, because so often you run into people in the pagan community who claim that they're being exclusive and focused only on quality and only letting the worthy people in, when what they really mean is they're only letting people in who see things exactly like they see them. And then they're not prepared for things that come out of left field. They have wonderful, excessive abilities in certain areas where everyone is focused because they're all the same, and nobody who can do the things that they don't that everyone else doesn't specialize in. And the truth of the matter is that no one person can do it all. You have to be open to many points of view, people with many different talents. Um, it is not enough, for example, to be a great ritualist. That's a wonderful skill. It's very important, particularly in the high priesthood. But if all you have in your leadership as a tradition are great ritualists, what are you going to do in a moment of conflict? What are you going to do when you have to deal with legal situations? What are you going to do when you have to deal with any of the thousands of things that can come up that have nothing to do with ritual? You need to have people from many backgrounds, and you need to be open enough in your requirements to be able to deal with people whose talents lay in different areas. And uh, on that subject of leadership um, instruction that I often speak on, that I think is a very, very important point. It's something I always tried to do, was not always successful in. And, I would say looking back at my many years um, in the world of pagan leadership, that when I had fewer people around me with disparate points of view, um, is when I found myself in making greater mistakes than other times. The wider the point of view, the better off you're always going to be. Now, part of what this brings, however, is that those people with different points of view aren't always going to agree with you. They're not always going to agree with each other, and they're not always going to like each other. And that can be hard to manage. I always said, and occasionally said publicly, that during the many years when I was serving as active first priest of the Corellian tradition and later as chancellor of the Corellian tradition, my number one job was trying to keep peace between all those disparate personalities. And I will say that here and now, that was um, both the most important and the hardest part of that job. And sometimes I did very well keeping peace between the personalities. Sometimes it was not a possibility. Sometimes I kept peace when maybe I should not have. Um, but these things you learn by doing, and you never go into your situations with perfect knowledge, and must never deceive yourself into thinking that you do. And hello to Pagan Bliss in the chat room. And Pagan Bliss says, very true. We've learned where there is variety and free expression, and we do. And Swackfan says, true indeed. Variety is the spice of life. Why, yes, it is. Um, and sameness, in my opinion, is never good. Yes, it can be good to have uniformity in certain things. In the Corellian tradition, we're known for our state robes, which are very particular. However, they're not there to create a uniform impression. They're there for practical reasons, including building an esprit de corps, but also so that on public occasions when they are worn, you can instantly tell who is in a position to answer a question, who is in a position to give you help. And also to remind the people wearing them of the weight of their various positions. A lot of people over the years have complained about the weight of the state robes if you reach a high position, but that's actually intentional to remind you that you're moving into positions of greater responsibility, where more is asked of you versus less. However, most of the things we do, we don't wear those for. They have their specific practical reasons for existing. When I was running, well, still am technically running Holy City Temple, but when I ran it out of Chicago, we had a large costume box. And I would frequently wear one robe or another. Not the state robes, but something, because I felt like it gave a nice magical feeling to our ceremonies. But they were always different. There was a variety. I dressed according to the holiday. And I thought that was another very cool way of going about that. Different ways of doing things are always good. Different perspectives on situations are always good. You need to have those differences in order to be able to move forward. In order to, well, going back to Project 2025, I've been warning people about this all through this last year and through the last several decades. Why? Because I happen to know Ed the Pagan, who was raised in evangelical circles and had inside knowledge of this situation. For the most part, people didn't choose to listen, but the warning was there. We could, as a community, have prepared ourselves long before this, but people mostly could not be bothered with it because it was not their preconceived notion. I could be bothered with it, however, because I was accustomed to looking at various different points of view, different information. And I think that we are better prepared for it because it was not a surprise to us as it is to some others. I can remember as we went through last year, there were people saying, oh, this is nonsense. This is just fear-mongering. Don't worry about this. There's nothing wrong. Well, here we are, and everything is just as it was said it would be. And so for our question, for ourselves, the question is, how do we respond to this? And we'll be talking about that in great detail. But the most important part of responding to it is to be open to many different ideas so that we can find the best way to move forward. And that's always true in every situation. Be open to multiple ideas that will help you to make the right decision. And with Lady Bitterwind, to come back to my first subject for today, she brought a very iconoclastic point of view into the Corellian tradition. which was very positive for us. Um, because left to our own devices, we could be a little august, and she helped to keep us a little closer to the ground. She helped us to realize things that um, were not necessarily initially obvious to us. For example, in our working with the ancestors, she is the one who said, to go by the stories you tell about these people, they were, as she put it, a bunch of rounders. They loved a good time. They loved a good joke. Why, when you channel them, are they so serious? You're censoring them, she said. And so we went to the ancestors and we said, are we censoring you? And they said, well, duh, and literally. And we stopped censoring them and found that they were as humorous and as lively in spirit as they ever were in life. And that was a very important lesson that we owe to Lady Bitterwind. And an invisible friend says, if we plan to walk between worlds, we might as well know how to get along with their inhabitants. And yes, absolutely. And we must always be prepared for the fact that we will encounter unexpected things. And so our minds must be flexible, and we must have access to divergent points of view, not only our own preconceptions. And this helps us tremendously. So this is my message for you today. And with that, let us take a moment for another message from our sponsors. Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours. And thank you to our sponsors, Equinox Learning Hub and Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions. I believe our next auction through Gaia Thrift will be tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central, and this will be a walking auction, as I understand, where we go through a number of different things that we have in the store and see what people might be interested in. So please join us for that. I hope that you've enjoyed today's program. It's interesting to come to that point in life where you are remembering your dear friends and siblings who are now in spirit. I've heard people say that although I'm such and such an age, inside I'm still 16. Well, I certainly am not. I'd like to think I'm far more mature than I was at 16, even though I was relatively mature at 16. I feel like I've grown a great deal during life, and I wouldn't care to go backwards. And I treasure the memories of people like Lady Bitterwind and so many other people I've known, and feel that it's been a great privilege to know them all. And also the people that I know today. And I look forward to making many more wonderful memories with all the people I know, including you, and savoring each one of them. And I hope that you also savor all the memories that you build and carry them in your heart as you go forward. With that, let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to help us to keep our minds flexible and open. Help us to be able to see the new and the unexpected and to react to unexpected things when they occur in the best manners possible. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love. And from respect, knowing that you're always with us, still we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always, and I will see you again tomorrow.